we must understand the politics of our community. And we must know what politics is supposed to produce. We must know what part politics play in our lives. And until we become politically mature, we will always be misled, led astray, or deceived or maneuvered into supporting someone politically who doesn't have the good of our community at heart. So the political philosophy of black nationalism only means that we will have to carry on a program, a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature. And then we will, whenever we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the good of the community at heart.
Grace and peace, everyone. This is your guest host, Shaina Smith Archer, welcoming you to another episode of Umoja. We're live on Facebook as well as on ZBVI Radio AM 780. So share the link, share the news, let a friend and family know that we're on. And today we have, as usual, another interesting and informative topic. Thank you to all those who've been sending well wishes with me to Eduenka. I've been sure to deliver. And you will be hearing from him very soon. As we always start the show with our affirmation, let's go. Umoja means unity. We must strive for and maintain unity in the family, our communities, our country, and across our people. Unity means we work together and take responsibility to build and maintain our community together. Unity means our brothers and sisters' problems are our problems and we solve them together. Unity leads to cooperative economics, where we build our businesses by supporting each other so we benefit from them together. Let us commit to unity for self-determination, to define ourselves, express ourselves, name ourselves, and produce for ourselves. Today's topic is right in line with our affirmation, and it will be about Virgin Islands history and heritage. We had a few holidays in November, and I think one was in October, celebrating our VI history or aspects of our VI history and heritage. And I thought it was important that we take the opportunity to talk about what those holidays' significance is, as well as some other areas of our history and heritage that we need to know more about. So I brought in with us today from the HLSCC's Virgin Islands Studies Institute, Miss Bernadine Louis, and she is no stranger to our program. Miss Louis, welcome back to Umoja.
Thank you very much, Shaina. It's really great to be here. You and I have had many conversations along this fair, even on your own show, the Vigilante Dialogues. Yes. And thank you for that introduction. Yes, I've contributed to the territory, as a long-standing public servant in the areas of public administration in those earlier years when I worked for government, the Ministry of Education and the public library system. And now I am at the college as the director of the Virgin Islands Studies Institute. And this topic falls within what we do. Our mission is that we acquire and we share. And we do a lot of research. This unit is a research unit, and we document, plan, and execute educational programs on history, culture, and contemporary issues of the Virgin Islands. So I'm an avid researcher, and I was also a part-time lecturer in Virgin Islands history. So I'm really happy to be here again. Thank you.
Awesome. So everyone has your background, just in case they had somebody who does not know you. But I think you're synonymous now when it comes to history and heritage. Just touch on a little bit about the genealogy project. I think that was going on this year, from last year into this year. Those portions make persons aware of what's happening there as well.
Yes, a part of what we do here as well, we have a really comprehensive database on family history and genealogies. So from time to time, we facilitate genealogy workshops, family history workshops. Actually, one is coming up for the Virgin Islands Community Association on Saturday coming, and we have done some in the past. But we have a really comprehensive database of almost 12,000 persons in there. and we assist persons in finding their roots, finding those connections to the Virgin Islands, and how we are related to each other. And not just the information with the particulars, who you are, who your parents are, your grandparents, but we have photos. And the database is just so much more because it also can be used for historical purposes. We track all the different historical events that happen in the territory through the years. So,
Okay. All right, great. So at the end of the show, we'll give persons some contact information so that they know how to reach out to you should they need that service. So today we're gonna start our conversation. Our last holiday, the last public holiday we had was the commemoration of the Great March of 1949 and the reestablishment of a locally elected legislative council. So let's start with the event, but I want to also get into some of the activities that were happening behind the scenes leading up to it, which most people may not know about, such as the BVI Civic League. So let's start with the event and then we'll kind of work our way backwards in terms of how that came about.
The BVI Civic League itself?
Well, you could start with that and then we go towards the march in terms of the work that the Civic League.
Yes, that 1949 march, of course, as you know, was a very, very significant event in the history of this territory. But like you said, to put it in context, before the march itself happened, there was a lot going on in the territory, I should say not going on, because the territory was really under the Leeward Islands colony, one of the presidencies we call it, and nothing much was happening. We were referred to basically as a backwater of the Leeward Islands, and we had a better affiliation with the United States Virgin Islands. And the Civic League itself was actually established in 1938 through the efforts of a gentleman named Hope Stevens, and he has roots right here in the BVI as well. His mother was from East End Penn family, and his father was from Nevis and was working here as one of the government officials. So this league was formed for the purpose of creating awareness of the plight of these islands, right, as a poverty-stricken presidency of the Leeward Islands group. The members at the time was Mr. David Fonseca, and he was the father of IG Fonseca, who is now one of our national heroes, and IG was one of the three of the gentlemen that were actually the leaders of the 1949 march. Then other members of the Civic League was Charlie Georges, he was the vice president, David Fonseca was the president, Howard Penn, the treasurer, and J.R. O'Neill, the secretary. And they set out to garner, signatures to send a petition to the Secretary of State in Britain, through the acting commissioner at the time. But that first petition, of course, was not successful. So, but the league itself, I find that not much is said and known about.
Real quick, when we interject. So the petition was for what?
The petition was to get back the Legislative Council because it was taken away in 1902.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All right. Okay,
and
go ahead.
I was going to say that, thanks, that the person that really pushed to get this league started was this gentleman, Hope Stevens, and unfortunately not much is known about him because he lived out of here most of his life. He was a successful lawyer in New York. But of course, like I said, he had roots here in the Virgin Islands, and he was really, really disappointed each time he came home to visit at how the place, looked and how it was not developing as it should have been. So he spoke to the gentleman that I call, the names that I call, H.R. Penn, J.R. O'Neill, and he got them to get together and said, guys, we don't have to take this. This country should not look like this, let us see if we can get the signatures, get a petition going, and send it up to Britain to have them get back the local legislative council. So that was the Civic League.
Do we know the reason why the council was dissolved in the first place? I have my theory because I did all this research for my research paper when I did the Virgin Islands Studies course back in 2015.
Mhm.
And, I myself had only heard mention of Hope Stevens, did not realize how integral he
Mhm.
was in mobilizing our community to see the connection between our social and economic development and political representation. Because, there was that gap in the system where, for basically a generation. So we were saying from 1901 all the way up to 1938 that there was no local representation. The government, as we refer to it today, was just what was he called? The administrator or the commissioner?
He was called commissioner at the time.
Yeah. So and today that's who we refer to as the governor.
No,
You know,
correct.
so that one person basically dictating what happened or did not happen on behalf of the governor, which was located in Antigua. And that was the seat of government for the Leeward Island Federation that we were a part of. Just real quick, educate us on what islands were also included in the Leeward Islands Federation.
Okay, the Leeward Islands Federation would have included Antigua, St. Kitts and Nevis, Montserrat, the Virgin Islands. Dominica was also in there for a short period of time, but in 1940 they were annexed to the Windward Islands. But the Leeward
Okay.
Islands group was that, the
And
more
Anguilla,
north and northeastern group.
okay. And Anguilla was also was a
Anguilla,
British colony.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Okay.
But yeah, but this whole history of the Leeward Islands group and everything goes way back, and how we were governed, right? Goes
Mm-hmm.
way back to 1672, when it is said that the Dutch were the first group really to have settled in the Virgin Islands, right? After Columbus sailed through here and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1666, a band of persons claiming themselves to be British came in, and they harassed the Dutch and chased them out. And in 1672, now we were annexed to the Leeward Islands group or
Mm-hmm.
colony, which was created in 1671, right?
Okay.
So we were annexed to this Leeward Islands group. But at that time, we really did not have a government like the other territories did.
Mm-hmm.
We were there, we were small and probably insignificant to the group, to the administration, which the governor of that group lived in. He operated out of Antigua. And so we were here closer to St. Thomas, the Danish West Indies at the time, and not much significance to them. So after 1670, we were annexed, and we really didn't get much attention. And so through the years, you have the government, and on the ground, they had what you call then in those earlier years a deputy governor. And after that, then it became then commissioner. But when eventually in 1816, they decided to split that group in two. And so we were with St. Kitts, Nevis, and Montserrat and Anguilla.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1871, they decided to regroup under what you call a Federation of the Leeward Islands, right? So
Mm-hmm.
as many times as they defederated a bit and they put them back together, it really didn't make much difference in what we achieved and what was given to us. We were given the crumbs, so to speak. And so when finally in 1956, and this has to do with Territory Day and why we were called Territory Day, first Colony Day,
Mm-hmm.
Territory Day, and now Virgin Islands Day, is that Mr. Howard Penn, who was then one of the legislators and so on, one of the what you call the unofficial nominated members, they decided to stay out of the federation after the Leeward Islands group broke up. It was defederated. They were going to form the West Indies Federation, and we decided to stay out of it because really and truly we had a greater relationship with the Danish West Indies, which became afterwards the United States Virgin Islands. And so, but during that time, while we were under the Leeward Islands, we were really, neglected.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing much was happening at that time, for us. And so that when Hope Stevens came home and visited in 1938, that's why he found the island looking so poverty stricken. And we decided that the best thing for us is to be able to have our own local representation on the ground.
Yeah.
And so the 1949 march, came about with all of these different issues and trying to get our local legislature back up and running.
Yeah. And again, for persons who may not know, we actually had what we call two-chamber house,
Correct.
where you had elected officials and appointed officials in the first House of Assembly back in the, I believe it was the 1700s. So the persons, of course, that would have been in that on the political scene at that time would have been the British planters, because our African ancestors were enslaved, so they did not participate until after emancipation, and they were allowed, based on the qualifications, to run for office and become elected.
Mhm.
So they were a part of the mix, but I suspect that was not something that was very popular for former slaves to now become part of the governance structure of the day. And there was this push and recommendation by the administrator to essentially dissolve the house. So you became essentially a non-democratic society. So it was a really um significant move when Hope Stevens and the Civic League came together and essentially started lobbying for about 10 years, until in 1949 when a second petition was done. And then and again, that was triggered by what most people would have heard, the story about Theodore Faulkner coming down from Anegada to seek medical treatment for his wife, and was dissatisfied with the services. And in talking to other people, he heard about the other dissatisfaction that persons would have had with how things were being done in our society at the time. And with that, no, public meetings were being held in the square, and he was basically giving voice to what people's concerns were and had been for quite some time
Correct.
at that juncture. So, persons sometimes think that, the march just happened by chance, but it was something that, again, it was a process that, some concerned citizens essentially got together, because there was no government to represent, the people, that the people had to represent the people and say, this is what we want. And I was amazed at the fact too that there was also a second petition where the petition was asking for the removal of the commissioner, Cruikshank,
Fiction.
because
Correct.
again they were dissatisfied with the unfair treatment and the lack of development and societal progress that was happening, because a lot of persons at that time, the economy basically was nowhere near what it is today. And we had to go out to the other Caribbean islands to look for work and send back home the money. So remittances basically were a big part, has always been a big part, I say, of Caribbean economies. And ours had its season where that was the case, where we were able to survive because of persons going out to work and coming back in.
Correct. Yeah. Like you said, there was really no representative government after emancipation. We still had a colonial legislature, because the legislature was made up of the planters who were here, and there was this property requirement, and you had to own land and all of that, to be a member of the legislative council. So it was really difficult even after our forefathers were emancipated to even get our foot in the door. And actually, the government that was here, they were not you know entertaining at all that it's uneducated indigenous folks to be part of a legislative council. So but a lot of other things happened in between that time. You had the 1853 cattle tax riot and other things going on, other legislation that were passed that was just, was not in the best interest of the population that was here. And so a lot of different things happened. And eventually the local plantation owners who were here, eventually they left. And for one thing, after 1834, it was no longer economical for them to be here. And so they went back to UK or wherever they came from, and basically left our ancestors here to fend for themselves.
Yeah.
So through time, over time, the government changed from to basically a crown colony government where the members were actually nominated, right? And with so few persons, they claimed they couldn't find suitable persons to be part of the Legislative Council. And so eventually, being a part of the Leeward Islands government, they felt, well, it's probably a waste of time to have a legislative council there. We can't find people to run. We can't find people to, run the country properly. So in 1901, the constitution was taken away, and in 1902, the legislative council was taken away. And so the governor of the Leeward Islands became the sole authority, along with the commissioner on the ground. And that's part of where we found ourselves with the 1949 march leading up to that. There were educational issues, there were economic issues. We wanted to get education beyond the primary level, and not even that they wanted to give us. They had to fight as well, the persons at the time. I think Dr. Whitley did, in his We Takes, did a very good synopsis to what was happening there, and specifically the persons who fought and struggled to get all these different benefits and so on, and the economy back up and running. And also Dr. Paul Balak, she wrote about some of that. So, we have some documentation and some other information out there about these different aspects of our history.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll take a commercial break here, and then we pick it up. And actually, we had on there about one of the topics for us to touch on today is the 80th anniversary of secondary education that was celebrated this year as well. And persons may not have been aware, but that is something, again, that we need to talk more about, because, again, sometimes we take for granted that we always had primary education, or I should say we always had a public school system forced off. And it was really the churches that took up the mandate of education, especially education for the former slaves, because this was something that the government was not interested in doing. The British government didn't, take it on as an initiative. And then, the ball started rolling from there. So we'll take a commercial break and be right back.
Yes, you're well on your way in life, lovely family, and your own home. What more can you ask for? Well, coverage that goes beyond hurricane, burglary, and fire. A policy that not only protects your home, it also protects your lifestyle. Such coverage does exist, and only at Nagico. From landscaping coverage to credit card fraud coverage and travel insurance. You can also count on us for the public liability coverage under the umbrella. Homeowners and renters Super Plus from Nagico Insurances. Nagico, what's in your policy?
The law offices of David Abednego, located at 12 Chadwell Street Road, downtown Tolonet Family Support Network, provides solutions for your land ownership and land subdivision challenges, and specializes in the easy preparation of wills and the timely creation of administrators, executors, powers of attorney, and guardianship for your elderly. For all of your legal and notary services, be sure to call the law offices of David Abednego at 494-8658, 494-8658, 499-2677, 499-2677. The law offices of David Abednego defend and protect you. Fresh produce of Movine's Garden of Eden can be found at Craft Alive. Movine's Garden of Eden brings you fresh seasonings, fruits, vegetables, and ground provisions from Mother Earth straight to your table. Call Movine at 543-3496, 543-3496.
Welcome back. You're tuned in to another episode of Umoja. On today's topic, we are talking with our guest, Ms. Bonadine Louis, from the Community College's Virgin Islands Studies Institute. And we started off talking about some of the significant events in our political, social, economic development. So we've already talked about the Civic League, Berlin, the 1949 March reestablishment. So I guess the timeline, let's pick it up from there, where we essentially in 1949, the petition was sent, and I think there was something that we missed, because I remember in my paper being surprised that there was a motion that was approved already by the Leeward Islands Federation about restoring the council. But again, the commissioner had not followed through on the instruction that had been given. So when the 1949 petition reached Secretary of State in the UK, it was something, a surprise where it was like the instruction was already given, but it had not been followed through on. So that was where now they sent someone to actually start the process of reinstatement, which would have been to start off with basically putting a constitutional order back in place. And I believe that first commissioner at that point was H.R. Penn, correct?
You mean the person that sent the petition?
No, the one that he was the one that they nominated to actually write the new constitution.
Yes, you are correct in that they had about maybe 3 attempts with this petition. The first time, the Civic League itself, those members put a petition together and they sent it on, but it was not successful. And so H.R. Penn, he went to a meeting of the Closer Union Conference in St. Kitts in 1947, and he put forward a petition to that meeting, and actually he got a lot of support there, and that's when he came back. And the petition should have gone from commissioner again, Mr. Cruikshank should have sent it to the UK, but apparently he delayed it. It didn't go for whatever reason. And so finally in 1949, on the advice of a legal person, I think Mr. Sidney Christian out of Antigua, who was visiting here, he said to them, and this would have been in 1949 leaders now, send it again, send it back to the UK and see what happens. And when it went to the UK this third time, the third attempt, I should say, it was successful. And so Mr. Howard Penn, he was charged with a committee with putting getting a constitution together. And they said it was patterned off of Montserrat's constitution. But Mr. Attorney Lawyer Todman always said it was minimal in its intent, and but it was something to start with. They got back, they elected it in 1950, and it went from there.
The elections were held the following year, so that was 1950, and then I think they swore in December. I think it was December 5th, 1950 was the date. So for persons who have not been at the House of Assembly building for a while, those persons that are at the front, the head bus that went in a few years ago, those were the first persons that were elected in that newly reinstated house. So that's one of those history facts. Again, it's something where, whether it's for tourists or for us, we need to know the significance of those persons and how they came to be there through community. Community power, I would say, in terms of getting that in. So we had an elected government, coming down the line, but even before then, I think it was something I was watching the other day. So I think with the national heroes that we just recently named, that was the holiday in.
It was in October.
Wow. One of the events that came up was the 1853 cattle tax riot. Talk to us a little bit about that. How did that come about, and what's the significance of it?
The 1853 cattle tax riot, that happened, according again to Dr. Norrell Harrigan, it was an attempt by the people to break with the past and let their present be felt, to let the authorities know that, we have endured a whole lot and we are not going to just sit back and, whatever is thrown at us. Because after full emancipation, of course, like I said earlier, colonial government remained, and the authorities, they were not about to consider, having uneducated persons to run the country. No, in fact, they practically kept them tied to the estates after instituting the apprenticeship system after emancipation, to work for further 4 years. But when that didn't work out, because the laborers eventually, the conditions did not improve at all after the apprenticeship system. But a downturn in the economy, and in addition to years of drought, caused the landowners to be heavily indebted. So the workers were laid off, and the conditions kept getting worse. And so there was basically, nobody to tax, right? So the legislature felt
revenue for the government to collect.
Revenue for the government, right? Because after, like I said, 1834, a lot of them left and went back, where they came from. But in June of 1853, around there, the House of Assembly then, again, still made up of, the colonial legislature, so to speak, they decided to impose a tax on cattle, and it went from 24 cents to 36 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the peasantry, our ancestors who were there, they were the ones that owned the cattle. I mean, they really worked hard. They purchased the land when they could, and they started to develop subsistence farming, livestock rearing, and so on, and crop production. And so they own a lot of the cattle. And to have imposed such a heavy tax at the time on them was really, it's really hit them financially. And so, to add insult to injury, as we will say, Shayna, the tax was due on the 1st of August 1853, which should have been the Emancipation Day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as Harrigan said, they were not taking this lightly. They were fed up. They felt that they had enough. And so, when they went to the Treasury, they decided they were going to pay the same tax. And the Treasurer at the time told them, no, the law said the tax is now increased.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, this is what we have. We'll pay and pay this later. And they refused to take it. And so they said, there was some scuffle and so on and such back and forth. And there was a little riot and so going on. And they were arrested because they felt that they were unruly.
Mm-hmm.
And they took them to prison. And they got word out to the other farmers and so on, the other persons out in the country, and they decided that they would come back. Now, the Methodist missionaries again attempted to assist them and so on, and decided, okay, send a petition to the commissioner and ask them to hold off on this tax.
Mm-hmm.
And so they could see they can work out something. And that again didn't go down well, because what they were asking for them to do would take a while, and they wanted this addressed, like now.
Mm-hmm.
So again, little pockets of riots and resistance happened all over the place, and some of them were arrested and taken to jail. And the other persons who were backing them up, and this was where Obadiah Dawson and Henry Garnett came in, and they are two who are named in the National Heroes. One of the persons also that's significant in this whole thing was Mr. McLevity.
Mm-hmm.
He again was in government at some point, and he was also trying to assist them to get this whole tax, this new tax, to have it delayed, if they could get it repealed at all. They were trying that. But the peasants who came from the country, they were not treated well. They were shuffled about to prison. They continued to riot. And as a result, they destroyed a greater part of Rotong by fire.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the members of the Legislative Council and the other settlers who were here, the other part of the plantocracy, they fled the country, leaving Commissioner Shad by himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me something. Was the fires intentional or were those accidental?
The fire for a lot of a part of it was intentional. It was intentional, yeah.
Okay.
Of course, some parts would have, if you bought a house here or there, others probably may have, got the whole thing. For the most part, it was intentional.
Okay. Yeah, because I know the extent of it really was essentially the fires got out of control, because there was a lot of fire damage throughout Main Street, because again, we did not have all that we have now on Waterfront Drive. This was all seaside. So the tongue that we are referring to would have been everything on Main Street. So, we know where the House of Assembly is, all the way down to the government house. That's essentially where, the central part of town would have been, where all of this activity would have been taking place that we're talking about. And a lot of the commercial buildings, even now, some of them would have been residential, because, this is where people would have been residing in addition to doing business, whether it was storefronts or whatever the case is. So it'd look completely different to what it is we're seeing now.
Yes. So, right. So, but after that, they continue to try to keep control, keep the folks under control, because the government structure changed in 1867. It became a fully nominated government comprising
Mm-hmm.
of executive council with a colonial secretary from out of Antigua, the colonial treasurer, and the president. The president here, on the ground.
Okay.
So they constituted what you call just the executive council and what you call a crown colony government. So there was no elections,
Mm-hmm.
so that they could continue to maintain control. But the point is too that the local population, they sent a message and say, we are no longer going to sit back and
Mm-hmm.
take kind of unfair treatment and this injustice that's going on. And so it really started from 1853 and up until 1949, when Faulkner out of Anegada and Fonseca and De Castro,
Mm-hmm.
the three leaders, they led the actual what we call the Great March. But in
Okay.
between that time, a lot of different things were going on. You had, like I said, the educational issues.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a little more, I guess, about the 80th anniversary. They wanted to get secondary education because at the time it was only primary. You could only go up to standard 7.
Mm-hmm.
Class 6, standard 7, and only those parents who could afford it could send their children off to get a secondary education. So access to secondary education just was not there.
Yeah.
And of course, then the economic part of it too, the poverty and no roads and no banks and no hotels and no, you know.
Yeah, very little commercial activity compared to what we do today. Perfect segue. So let's talk about the history of our education system.
Mhm,
So where do we start? We did mention before the break that essentially the churches, the Methodist Church, and the Anglican Church, I think specifically, were the ones that started to create primary school or started primary school education.
in the churches,
Yeah,
yes.
and then that was the government. The government assisted, I think, in terms of funding, but it was very much underfunded. I remember reading some of this in the Virgin Islands story, written by Norwell Harrigan, doctors Norwell Harrigan and Paul Valak. So very interesting book. Persons, I don't know where they can get copies of it, but definitely you can go to the college library. I know you guys have a copy, or several copies that persons can probably check out and read. So take us through the progression of our education system.
Well, like you said, the primary level was really the domain of the churches in those earlier years at the time, and eventually government, did their part providing funding for whatever. But the 80th anniversary itself of secondary education, which is really what we are celebrating, it has a long history, and it certainly has a long history of struggle
Mm-hmm.
to get access to secondary education, and that was headed by a few key individuals, um, which that helped the secondary level education to come into being on the 3rd of May. That would have been in 1943.
Mm-hmm.
And it started out with what you call a senior school was created. And this really was the beginning of access to secondary education in the Virgin Islands. Prior to getting that institution off the ground, there was a lot of agitating and lobbying to get the educational level beyond primary level, as we were just saying.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that what you call it, class 6 or grade 7. I remember my dad, the late Honorable Louis Walters, teaching the children at that level at St.
Mm-hmm.
Mary's Primary School in Virgin Garden. And I
Okay.
used to look at these children and they looked to me like, big adults, like, what are these adult looking persons doing in school? What he taught at level. And some of them repeated because there was nothing else to do unless you go into the world of work. You couldn't get into a secondary education level.
Mm-hmm.
Unless your parents, of course, could afford to send you off to St. Kitts Grammar School or the Antigua Grammar School, which were the choices in those days, or you headed off, unless you headed off to the USA or elsewhere.
Yeah.
So even here in the area of secondary education, history repeats itself in that we were treated as a backwater colony, being disregarded, receiving the crumbs left on the table. When we wanted secondary education, the commissioner at the time and the governor, who was Sir Brian Freestone, I think his name was, came down out of Antigua. And they did not want to give us secondary education. They felt like we are a small territory.
Mhm.
We probably were not, you know,
Basically,
contributing enough to.
anything to do with this education, I think, was a mindset.
Yeah, I think so. And somebody asked me the other day, well, why would they not want to give us
Mhm.
secondary education? I mean, this was something that was available in the other territories. What was it? Why were we, so disregarded and so ill-treated that they don't want to give us secondary education? They took away our government, they don't want to give us back our constitution. They don't want to give us back our government. It's really mind-boggling.
Mhm.
But again, our people were very resilient. We were, we knew what we wanted. We knew that we have to be in that position to be self-governing. And so that 1949 Great March really made a difference. I want to show you too by holding it up. In 1993, we produced this. It was the 50th anniversary
So like
publication.
closer to the camera.
Oh, yes.
There
Okay.
you go. Yeah.
Golden Jubilee, the 50th anniversary of secondary education. And it was produced by a committee
Mhm.
that was, we had a committee headed by Gary Penn at the time. I was on the committee as well at the time. I was in the public library, director of public library system. And so with my staff members, we did practically all of the research and put this publication together. Unfortunately, it never hit the public, but
Oh,
it's here, and this have all the history of the secondary education system and how we got it. It has a directory of almost everybody that passed through high school,
mhm.
um, what year they entered, what were
And
they.
that was actually my graduating year from high school. So I remember that year very vividly because it was a lot of celebration and emphasis on the fact that it's been 50 years. For
Yes.
and again, for us as the students in that year, we may have thought, education or secondary education has always been around and
Mm-hmm.
that it would have been much more than 50 years. But, under starting to research the history, you started to realize, like you're saying, there was a struggle. It wasn't something that was a given
No,
that,
not at all.
we needed to expand the education system and that this is what it would be about. So,
Mm. And I think recently also Dr. Charles Whitley wrote a book about, the history of education, and that also includes primary level as well
mm-hmm,
as secondary level. We are hoping to have a panel about that. We were hoping to have it this year, but the year is fast closing,
mm-hmm,
and we probably will do it very early next year. He will be the main speaker. We'll
mm-hmm.
have persons from the teachers, the educators side, those who taught at the schools, and also past students to. I think we invited you to be part of that panel, so we'll get back to you on that. And so,
Yes.
so we had what you call a senior school in 1943, and
Mm-hmm,
I think there was even a threat to close it. It wasn't what the persons here in the territory, and again you have names like Howard Penn,
mm-hmm,
um, Dr. Noel Harrigan, Oliver Flax. They were educators. They did a petition from the Teachers Association in terms of what they wanted to see at the secondary educational level, and not just the senior school was not what they envisioned. And so eventually in 1948, then they opened it again and it became the Virgin Islands Secondary School.
okay.
So some of the persons today that we know probably were graduates of that Virgin Islands Secondary School. I
Mm-hmm,
have a photo of the class of 1955,
mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
quite a number of those persons that the older generation today, they were part of that class. Then it became the BVI High School in 1968, and that would have been, I guess, our generation and later.
Yeah.
Then I remember I was in the Ministry of Education then, and actually I was the desk officer of education, because I remember being a part of the ceremony and the planning when the high school was named after Mr. Elmo Stout, and it became the Elmo Stout High School, which that is, I think that would happen in 2007.
Mm-hmm,
We honored him and named the high school after him. So, senior school, 1943. We have a list of the pioneer students. Um, H.L. Stout was one of those, and Then we have the 1948, the Virgin Islands Secondary School. Then it became the BVI High School in 68. And in 2007, it was changed to Elmore Stout High School. So this 80th anniversary, what we're really trying to do is to actually we are filling in a gap now of what, about
30 years.
30 years, yeah, 30 years. And that is a project that I think I'm going to take on here at the Virgin Islands Studies Institute to try to fill in that the 30 years from 1993 to present. Working with the high school and a couple of other persons, we are going to form a committee and try to see if we can fill that gap. Information gap.
Having that historical record is very important. You know, and I say to persons all the time that it's very key that we document the history as it's being created, because you know we can't trust that, you know, we let 30 years pass by and somebody is going to go back and do it, but that we always should be, you know, celebrating the milestones as they come along and making sure that we're documenting and building our library. Because you know, when someone was saying to me some time ago about a family member being able to find something about the Virgin Islands history in the London archives, so I said, yeah, they that is one thing the British do very well when it comes to documentation and knowing what's happening. Everything that was happening in the colonies can be found up there in the British archive. So it's something where we have to make sure that we're building our local archive here so that we have that essentially as a national treasure trove, so to speak. And I really want to encourage everyone to go up to the college's library. You have a section that's Virgin Islands history strictly, right?
Yes, we have that separate too. The Learning Resource Center is the general collection. It's there for the students and the faculty and staff, but it also serves the community. But in the Virgin Islands Studies Institute, which is a research unit primarily, we have all the Virgin Islands history documents or anything that's pertained to the Virgin Islands, contemporary issues like the Commission of Inquiry reports, and all the different things that have been happening over the years. We acquire those for research purposes.
We do need and that's really key. All right, so I think well, let's move into, since we're on anniversaries. Next year is another big anniversary for us here in the Virgin Islands, and it is going to be the 190th anniversary of emancipation. You know, this year I heard persons referring to festival as if that's the significance of what we do in August. And I want to encourage us that that's not where the focal point should be in terms of whether it was 7 years of festival or not, but that the reason for the festival is the anniversary of emancipation, and it's 190 years, because I remember for the 185th, again, there was not enough emphasis in my mind in terms of the branding, the promotion of, you know, the significance of the festival is around the anniversary of emancipation, that every year this is what we're celebrating. So we want to start getting the message out from Orly. Next year is 190 years, which was 1834 to 2024, God spare our lives, that our ancestors were emancipated, even though they weren't fully emancipated, because I came to learn, you know, the apprenticeship was unpaid. So essentially, it was still free labor being contributed for an additional 4 years, and they were actually trying to extend it. Is that correct? That after the 4 years, they were trying to extend it again?
Under the documentation, it should have been 4 years for those who were house slaves initially, and 6 years for those who were in the field.
Okay.
But they made it 4 years even for everybody, because again, by then, our ancestors started to wake up and realize, no, this is not benefiting us at all. And they really wanted to put that whole experience of being on the estates or the plantations behind them. And so that's the time when a lot of them left and went on to the Dominican Republic or into the ABC Islands, Aruba, to Panama, and the United States, other places where wages were, you know, much better. And you mentioned also sending back the remittances back home, and that worked, for a while, until eventually in the 1960s we got into tourism, and now in financial services, and kind of this is where we are right now. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess most people know the story in terms of emancipation, but I think one of the little known told ones would be around the fact that, the abolition of slavery again was not something that just came automatically, that there had to be agitation for it, and it was happening over several years. Share a little bit with us in terms of, first the slave trade was abolished and then eventually emancipation. What all led up to that?
Yeah, the slave trade abolished in like 1807, and basically there was a cutoff now of bringing in persons, but what happened was that even though the slave trade was abolished, though, and this is how Kingstown was created, the British took it upon themselves to, to monitor the seas, the area, the patrol, and they came across these 4 vessels that still had slaves on them, enslaved persons, and they intercepted them and they brought them into Tortola, which was the closest court, Admiralty Court, and those persons were freed automatically, and those are our ancestors who became the persons in the what is now called Kingstown. So after the emancipation, even before that, like you said, the enslaved persons were, they heard tales that they were given their freedom, especially after, you got this word that the slave trade itself was abolished and that the landowners and the planters were keeping it from them. And so, and a lot of the plantations, there was riots and so on, especially on Josiah's Bay plantation. And some of them, a lot of them from there, they were sent off they were deported and exported out to Trinidad and Guyana and some of those countries where these same planters had other plantations. Right? So eventually, with all of that, the enslaved, agitated and so on for their freedom, eventually in 1834, and of course you had the William Wilberforce and then in the UK joining the fight, and in 1834 we finally got the Emancipation Act. And so that is really, like you're saying, Shaina, what the whole festivities is all about, to celebrate the emancipation from slavery, of our forefathers from slavery. In those earlier years, what they celebrated with church services and picnics, and there's always this issue about where the Emancipation Proclamation was read, whether it was read at the Sunday morning well, or whether it was in the churches, and quite frankly, it was both. Because it was read in the churches, but then there were those who they came down from the outer districts and so on, and they always stopped at the Sunday morning well and rested, got water, changed into their Sunday best and their shoes and all that, and then went to church. So for those who didn't go to church that day, or for whatever reason who didn't go to church, the president at the time, William Rogers Isaac, he read the proclamation there at the Sunday morning well, because it was a spot where you would find a lot of the
people
congregating there and so on. So it was actually read there as well as in the churches.
Okay.
But that's the whole idea behind the celebration. So they had picnics in those earlier years and all these things. But when there was a coronation of for one of the monarchs, and it's all this gaiety and costumes and so on, they decided, why can't we have our celebrations in that way? And so then they started having the parade. That's why now we are saying it's 70 years, because that's when the actual festival started in the form that it is now, with the parade and the costumes and so on and so forth. And it's really 190 years since emancipation. You're correct.
Okay. All right. And then basically it's evolved over the years. I know there's a lot of talk in terms of, what activities or different types of events should be happening. And that can be a show in and of itself, where we can talk about, how Eastern Long Look festivities started, the Caribbean Cultural Fiesta started, in addition to all the things. But, you know, we'll reserve that one for our show next year, because I think it's something that we probably do need to unpack and
Mhm.
see how, you know, we can actually make this um, one of the signature events every year that we do in terms of celebrating our VI history and heritage, because that's always something for me that we look around the Caribbean and we see where when they refer, whether they refer to it as carnival or festival, it's a big time for the community. It's a big celebration for the community to come together, that has historical significance, as well as it's just something for us in terms of modern times to continue to celebrate who we are as a people. Because one of the things that concerns me, and I know persons talk about it all the time, is in terms of how do we build national pride? And it is through the celebration of our history and heritage, you know, the different occasions that we can't afford to just treat it as a beach day because we're off from work, but that we definitely, you know, do the education around, well, why do we have Heroes and Founders Day? Why are we celebrating the March of 1949?
Correct.
You know, why, as well as Virgin Islands History Day. Go ahead.
Yes, I agree with you. I know that this year in particular, a lot of persons were disappointed with how with what they saw and how the whole culture and everything and history is celebrated now.
Mm-hmm.
We really call it a festival, not a carnival, but we are kind of afraid that we are losing our culture, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that culture that makes us who we are. We always say when you go to Rome, you know you do as the Romans do. But we want to see more of that culture coming back into our celebration. So this year that you're talking about coming up in 2024, 190 years of emancipation, or 70 years since 1954, when we first started celebrating it in this way
Mm-hmm.
with the costumes and all of that. We want to have our diaspora come home, and we really want to get back into showcasing our culture. So
Yeah.
it will be interesting to see what we come up with for this year's 2024 celebration. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully that will be a new start for us in terms of, of us showcasing our cultural heritage. Even the new policy, the cultural policy that was prepared by the Department of Culture, that put guidelines in place as
Mm-hmm.
to the way forward. What
Has
we
been
can.
adopted now. That's officially, we have a culture policy.
Oh, we have a cultural policy. I was told that it still has to be discussed, I think, in the House of Assembly. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but it was submitted to
Okay.
the government for consideration. So
Okay.
it's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I think also before we take our last commercial break and go, you are also a part of developing, I think it's the Virgin Islands Studies curriculum for primary school, because that's something, you know, that's a big thing for me in terms of developing, having that.
Yeah. Yes, there was this Virgin Islands Historical and Cultural Committee that was put in place since probably 2021. So I'm part of that committee, being represented from the Virgin Islands Studies Institute. We have had a slow start, and so it's something though that we need to get back to,
Mhm.
and that's why this book as well came out, the
But put it back
1949.
to you.
Back to okay, right.
There, yeah.
The 1949 March. This came out of that whole exercise,
Hmm.
having us a group of us together, including some curriculum officers, because we do the Virgin studies, from here. We do a lot of the research and so on. But then the curriculum people will tell us um, whether it's appropriate, age appropriate for the
Okay.
different levels, the primary level, the secondary level,
Hmm.
for the community. So we still have a lot of work to do. There's a lot
Okay.
more work to be done. Even now, right, that we have named the national heroes, we still have a lot of work to do in terms of getting full bibliographical information, not bibliographical, sorry,
The Bible.
biographical information here for these
Yeah.
persons, because people are saying they're not sure who they are. There's not a lot of information about them. Some of them, of course, are very well known, Honorable H.L. Stout, the three
Mhm.
leaders of the 1949 march. But then you have those earlier persons like Perrine Georges and those others who were part of the whole plantation economy.
Mhm.
So we are right now working on research to give people a little more information as to who they were and what they contributed, their contribution overall. So
Awesome.
that'll work.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing for me where again, just touching back on what you said in terms of the for the festival,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's for us as a community. I think sometimes we become too laid back over the last years. I remember when I was in primary school, I participated in August Monday Festival parade all the way up through to high school. And it was either through community organizations like my school. I remember I don't know if it was some celebration with education. And I remember there was a call that went out to for the schools to basically participate. So they would take the theme and they would create, a troop, a floop, whatever it was, to be a part of that. And I remember being a part of that. I remember for I think it was the 75th anniversary of guiding that basically the guides, the whole organization, I was in the Brownies at the time, we put an entry into the parade. So it's something for us as a community, all of us to decide, where are our areas of participation? Because it's not just about having the troops with the feathered costumes and the music, because oftentimes persons talk about that's all we're seeing in the parade. No, but it is because we're not choosing to participate at the levels that we are accustomed to, because it's never about the bacchanal.
Right.
Again, it's an opportunity for the community to essentially come out and put themselves on display. And even the other ethnicities that live among us, that, we encourage them to also participate and showcase, their what their background is and whatever it is. I don't see any issue with that because, I remember some years ago when even the church had a troop a few years back. I think it was the Alecon Church, and I participated in that. And there was such a uproar about it, and it was like I didn't.
About what? The church taking part in the
Yes,
festival?
having
Yeah.
having an entry in the parade.
But this, what people don't realize is this, the church was a big part of the whole celebration in those early years. We used to have what you call Fete on the Field. That was managing, you know,
Coordinated
and
by
by
the
the
church.
churches, by the Anglican Church and the Methodist Church, and they would alternate each year. And that's why I say it started out as a picnic and so on. It was called Fete on the Field. Then
Mm-hmm.
they added the horse racing aspect to it, and
Okay.
then that became a different day because it was kind of clashing with Fete on the Field. And then
Mm-hmm.
of course Eastern Long Look decided that they wanted their own day of celebration. I mean, who knows down the road, and we might have another holiday for, I don't know, for Carrot Bay and and Jocelyn Dyke,
The
So
business community won't like that, but
I know exactly, but
whole week. But again, it's something where if we want to see festival is whatever we make it. So I'm
yeah.
just gonna put the call out there.
Another thing, Shane. I
All our
mean, if you
business
look at it,
organizations to
yeah.
take part and start planning, because we're gonna blink. Christmas
Mhm.
is gonna be here, and then we're gonna blink again, and August is going to be here. So we need to start our planning from early,
Yeah,
and and again, make the diaspora a big part of it. First,
correct.
inviting persons to come home. I know a lot of persons, including ourselves, are planning a family reunion.
Mhm.
So we're expecting that we're gonna have a good bit of our folks coming through. And again, this is opportunity to launch the cultural policy. Hopefully, it'll be adopted by then. And these again are occasions where this is how we continue to build our national identity, because we're teaching ourselves what it is about us that we have to be proud of. And that for me is like always one of the things that drives me or motivates me to have these conversations, because I might know the information, but I know there are a lot of portions that younger and older that don't know. So, and that is all part of, why we take positions on certain things as a country and say, it doesn't matter, but it does.
Yeah.
So, Bonadine, I thank you for coming through today. If persons would like to contact you at the Virgin Islands Studies Institute, let them know your contact details and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, I can be contacted at telephone number 541-2168, or you can email B as in boy, Louis, my surname B, Louis, or Louis. It's really Louis, but I also do Louis as well,
Mhm.
at hlscc.edu.vg.
Okay. All right, great. And again, they are located in the Learning Resource Center building in the library aspect of it. So it's the second doors. If you're not going into the auditorium, it's on the left-hand side, and you go in there and you can ask directions for the Virginal Studies Institute. If you've never heard about it, please pay it a visit. It's also the home of the room that we have dedicated to the namesake of the college, H.L.
Okay.
Stout,
Oh, yes,
and
that's part of our collection.
a
And the
lot of
Maritime Museum over at the Marine Center is also under the Virgin Islands Studies Institute.
okay, great. And that's over on the other side by the Marine Center.
Right.
Okay, awesome. All right, folks. So yes, this is a time of celebration. So for Christmas, I mean, probably a good time to go as long as if the college is open to visit. Take your families. Again, we need to teach our young people, who we are, why we are the way we are. And that is one of the sure ways for us to continue to build our national identity, build our national pride. We're out of time, but one of the things that I saw, Bonadine, this week, I was watching Barbados's Independence Day celebration. And one part of it was recognizing their national present day heroes. And that is something that I think we need to do more of. I know we have a national badge of honor. I don't know if we have anything else, but one of the things that they did, I mean, from the youngest head boy and head girl in schools, were presenting badges. There were, public songs. There was one where there was, essentially like best head of department, but it was more so about the head of department as well as the department was recognized. Athletes were recognized, persons in media were recognized. So, I said that to say that these are things that, again, let's say on Virgin Islands Day, we need to recognize not just, those who have already gone before us, but those who are currently building the nation.
Correct.
And recognize them even from their earliest age, because again, this is how we build that community spirit that we talk about in our affirmation. That person start to understand, hey, it's we don't have to wait till they're dead and gone, or for us to have the Queen recognize them, that we need to start doing this for our own selves as it relates to that. So I was really impressed with that in terms of, I was like, wow. And they had, they music, entertainment, art, the whole works. So that for me was something that I want to put out there, throw out there as a thought for us again to think about, whether we do it again during the Emancipation Festival, during Virgin Islands History Day. We have so many of these holidays, and this will only help to add the significance, I think, to it, to make sure that we are recognizing our history as it's made, so to speak. Not that, we wait till 20 years later and then we start to rehash. But that
Yeah,
we
but the heroes and forefathers day, that's really now what it's all about. One of the good things about what happened this year, we were able to also include the fact that the 80th anniversary of secondary education, but the Premier's office, we use that opportunity to also recognize any teacher whether primary level or secondary level, who taught in the system and who was, 80 years or older. But over time, we are going to recognize all educators. So what you're saying there is correct in that you don't have to be, deceased or whatever. And we are going to be asking the public to be a part of this in that we want nominations from the public.
Okay.
For the different categories. We're going to have different categories that we're going to look at to start honoring people. Yeah.
Yes, please.
So it will happen. It will happen.
Awesome.
You'll hear more about that.
I'm glad to know it's on the stove someplace cooking.
Yes, it is.
All right, Melody. So thank you again for being here.
Nice to see you again.
We're gonna have our last commercial break and then be right back for a wrap up.
You're well on your way in life, lovely family, and your own home. What more can you ask for? Well, coverage that goes beyond hurricane, burglary, and fire. A policy that not only protects your home, it also protects your lifestyle. Such coverage does exist, and only at Nagico. From landscaping coverage to credit card fraud coverage and travel insurance. You can also count on us for the public liability coverage under the umbrella. Homeowners and renters Super Plus from Nagico Insurances. Nagico, what's in your policy?
Ocean Conversion BVI Limited, a local water production company, was established in 1991 and was purchased in 1996 by a visionary group of BVI Islanders who recognized the importance of pooling their resources for BVI ownership of our vital resources. As a good corporate citizen, Ocean Conversion, along with other BVI Investment Club affiliated companies, have given back in excess of $75,000 annually for sponsorships of various community events, scholarships, and schools. Through all of the adversities Ocean Conversion has faced recently, it still continues to practice good corporate citizenship while delivering to the people of the British Virgin Islands an uninterrupted supply of potable water, which exceeds international quality standards. Ocean Conversion, a locally owned company, providing a continuous flow of water for over 20 years.
It's gonna be a
We put a high premium on service, which is why you and your needs come first at Medicure. Our proficient pharmacy offers quality prescriptions fulfilled by trained and competent pharmacists. Medicure completes the healthcare needs of all, from maternity with pregnancy and ovulation kits to discounts for seniors and supplies for diabetics. See us for walkers, wheelchairs, crutches, and commodes, baby formulas, cold, cough, and flu remedies, and tonics. Our full-service laboratory provides professional and confidential testing. See us in Road Town by the Roundabout, Tortola Pier Park, and Virgin Gorda. Note our numbers. Medicure, 444-6189. 444-6469. Lab, 444-7701. And Virgin Gorda, 444-5479.